questioned, wasn't he, by the Leader of the Opposition, Rishi Sunak, about foreign policy in Ukraine. I think I heard the word unity about 4 times, Sam.
That's right. I mean, it's worth just analysing this as an event. It was... And we watched very closely, didn't we? Because it is the first with Keir Starmer taking Prime Minister's questions from the dispatch box. And I thought it was a solid rather than exuberant event. There could have been more kind of partisan cheering, but the tone was, by and large, solid and serious and kind of workmanlike. And one of the big reasons for that, curiously, was all down to Rishi Sunak. As you mentioned, he chose not to go on issues of greater partisan disagreement, but instead to concentrate on areas of agreement, notably Ukraine, and repeatedly praised Keir Starmer for backing him when he was Prime Minister on various complex issues of foreign policy, particularly to do with Russia, and sort of asked that the new Prime Minister reciprocate. And I think in doing so, I mean, it's an interesting tactic from the Prime Minister and from the Leader of the Opposition, but what you've got there is an interim leader, and we'll see whether he sustains this, perhaps not wanting to particularly engage in some of the more kind of fiery approaches to Prime Minister's questions, maybe leaving that to leadership contenders. Yep. You saw a much more pugnacious approach this week, for instance, from James Cleverly, now the Shadow Home Secretary. He's obviously announced he's going for the leadership. But perhaps this tactic of a slightly calmer approach and letting other voices work out the best approach to challenge the Prime Minister. I wonder whether that will endure. We learnt a bit about the way Keir Starmer's going to do Prime Minister's questions, I thought. He put at the centre of his argument, I think, in the chamber just then, this idea that things are so much worse than we were expecting. We were expecting him to do this during the election campaign. I am not in the slightest bit surprised. We knew this was coming. All the way through the election campaign, Labour's position on things like tax was predicated on the idea that they've got a proposition that wouldn't require the raising of any further taxes beyond the ones that they announced. There were no plans unless things changed. Yep. And lo and behold, here we have the Prime Minister a few days into his premiership saying things are unexpectedly worse. Now, I think that argument, are things worse than expected, is going to be at the heart of the debate that we hear. And the Prime Minister today, Rachel Reeves on Monday, are going to claim that things are worse than expected, for instance, in prisons. They're worse than expected in the care sector. It's worse than expected. He actually mentioned people trying to get their own home. And I think that this is the argument that Labour are going to try and bludgeon the Tories with, that our inheritance was just dreadful. And so for me, the most interesting thing was if that is the landscape, that is the landscape that Rishi Sunak chose not to address. He knows that's the big argument in British politics right now, and he went on something else. He went on an issue that he decided that inevitably would not cause a great deal of heat and light in this Prime Minister's questions. Just one more little observation. It was curious how I remember back in 97, 98, 99, one of the slightly gruesome spectacles that you got back then was Labour MP after Labour MP kind of slathering praise over Prime Minister Tony Blair in Prime Minister's questions. Actually, there's quite a lot of challenge from the Labour side, I thought, in this. Yeah, exactly. Nadia Whittome, her question about trans, clearly unhappy with the answer. Implicit discomfort in the Labour position from Mohammed Yassin, the Bedford MP, urging for a sort of greater pressure for a ceasefire beyond where the Labour government is currently positioning themselves. It's interesting that there wasn't that tone of reverence that I thought I used to see in the early days of Brown and Blair's respective governments. So that too is a bit of a change.